Michael has just slept with a girl and immediately asked her to leave. He can't sleep with anyone in the same bed. In another part of the Scottish city of Glasgow, Susan angrily throws stones into the river. Her latest relationship didn't work out. Susan is an epidemiologist. She was invited to the hospital to examine a patient, an ordinary driver, who experienced depression yesterday and then lost his sense of smell. Donald is isolated, and Susan communicates with him through the glass. The man is irritated. He has been here for 11 hours. Susan wonders why they invited her specifically. The thing is, there are some patients with similar symptoms in every city. About 100 in England, as well as in France, Belgium, Italy, and so on, and all of them appeared in the last day. There's no common factor among the patients. Michael works as a chef in a seafood restaurant. As usual, it's busy in the kitchen, but James has time to inquire how his colleague could treat the beauty he was with yesterday. Michael goes out for a smoke, but forgot his cigarettes. So, he asks Susan, who is peeking out the window. For one, Michael wants to get to know her, but Susan is not in the mood. Doctors have checked all cases in Scotland and found no connection between the patients. It's impossible to say for sure if it's a virus, but it's definitely spreading. It could be poison, or maybe it's environmental. Different people in the middle of the street suddenly start crying and recalling the worst moments of their lives. This condition affects both the elderly and children. After being overwhelmed by grief, they lose the ability to smell. It's called the strong olfactory syndrome. Susan conducts laboratory research. More and more people are appearing in masks on the streets. Markets, stadiums, and restaurants are closing. Cooks are left without work. With nothing else to do, James decides to have fun with laughing gas. Today, there's no one to feed, and the workers have gone home. When Michael is left alone, Susan approaches. Today she's more talkative, and Michael suggests cooking for her. Sea Angel suits the woman's taste. Michael goes for dessert, and when he returns, he feeds his guest in tears. Susan remembers her deceased father and can't stop crying. She worries that she might infect Mikhail. They talk about how the disease is not transmitted. He helps her get home. Susan cried all day, and Michael lay down with her on the bed and soon cried too. Now it's time for Susan to comfort him. In the morning, she reports that she has completely lost her sense of smell, and the same is true for Michael. Then he realizes it's time to leave. Well, at least we don't smell the stench anymore, says Susan's colleague Steve. In their trade, a sense of smell is essential during cooking. They compensate for the lack of smell by seasoning the food with spices, making the dishes more salty, spicy, sweet, and sour. Unfortunately, with the loss of smells, memories associated with them also disappear. Michael tries to persuade his new acquaintance to come to his place and take a walk. After some hesitation, Susan agrees. On the street, a girl recreates the smell of the forest after rain for the audience. Handing out leaves, she tells about a walk in such a forest, complementing her story with violin playing. Michael suggests the woman invite him to her home. Well, if she doesn't want to invite him, she can just go home herself and he will follow her. So they did, and reaching her home, they immediately engaged in lovemaking. Ironically, this time Susan wanted to be alone with herself, and she asked Michael to leave. The embarrassed man left her his business card in case she decided to call him. Some guy shouts to the whole street that sinners need to repent. The time of God's judgment has come. Michael visits his ex-girlfriend's grave, and Susan walks with her sister, who convinces her to think about serious relationships. Not all men can be jerks, after all. Environmentalists are sure that this is the beginning of an ecological apocalypse caused by pollution and GMOs. Intelligence claims that fanatics are behind this, threatening God's punishment. Only pure people of the right faith will once again have the ability to smell. Well, those who are sure that this is the work of capitalists believe that the military virus should stimulate the economy. A doctor runs past Susan, and Steve has a panic attack. There is so much hatred in the world, he shouts. Even after the maximum dose of tranquilizer, the man continues to twitch. Soon, a similar attack happened to Susan in the parking lot. I can't endure it alone, the woman says. Michael also collapsed on the floor and says all sorts of crazy things about what his body gives him. James calmed him down, but after a moment, he also lay down on the floor. The next stage is terrible hunger. Susan gnaws on the coat of the calming woman and sucks her fingers, chewing on the flowers from the bouquet. Cooks and waiters greedily devour everything they found in the kitchen. Townspeople bite into raw fish with their teeth. What is happening in other countries around the world? Living rabbits, toothpaste, lipstick, everything goes into the stomach. Poor James poured himself with sunflower oil. And suddenly, all this passed. Symptoms appeared and disappeared simultaneously in all patients. At the same time, people permanently forgot what taste is. Michael came to Susan at the first opportunity. And now, lying in bed, they ponder whether they will lose their other senses. After all, smell and taste are connected, so other senses may not suffer. But if not, then it's the end of humanity. Waking up, Susan checked if this world was still in place. Everyone is going to work, and they have to go to work. Although Michael doesn't have a job anymore, his boss told him they closed. People don't care what they shove into themselves anymore. For example, damn expensive cognac. But with the same success, you can pour medical alcohol into yourself and you won't notice the difference. But Michael is more optimistic. Society is trying to come to terms with itself after the recent outbreak. The population is returning to its usual activities, making every effort to do the same things as before. After a few weeks, the sense of taste became a distant memory. Other senses took its place. In restaurants, guests now listen to the sound of wine splashing and the crunch of bread, temperature and consistency. What is most important in food, its dryness or moisture, granularity, and airiness. In general, life goes on. Having fun in the bathroom, Michael and Susan decided to snack on shaving foam and soap. After that, the woman opened up. Sometimes she hates her sister's children simply because she can't have her own, so she pretends she has no time for them because of work. Michael, on the other hand, talked about his girlfriend who fell seriously ill. Instead of taking care of her, he just ran away. He visits her grave to feel guilty, but he doesn't feel the guilt. Troubling news came from Bangkok. After an outbreak of rage, people began to lose their hearing. Right before Susan's eyes, her Thai colleague went into a rage and started smashing the laboratory. The acute hearing loss syndrome led to real chaos that engulfed the entire world. People attack each other, kill, mutilate, set fire. The uninfected can only wait for it to happen to them. Michael wanted to seal this couple on Polaroid. In Berlin, a child was born with all the senses. Perhaps antibodies can still be found. Now the entire population wears masks. The restaurant, however, was still closed by the city authorities. Thousands of people locked in their homes due to quarantine. The government instructs chefs to cook for them. Susan is now homeless, and her home is also quarantined. She can go to the gym, where the uninfected have gathered, or go home to Michael. The streets are not calm. Cries and moans are heard. Lovers nuzzle through the masks and embrace. This is how they started living together. Suddenly, Michael started saying nasty things about Susan and their relationship. He claimed that the woman doesn't represent anything, just like everyone else. Only she can't have children. After that, Michael started to smash up the apartment, breaking everything in his path. Susan had to leave. Chaos was happening around. Souls tearing in agony were heard nearby. One woman asked to get in the car, but Susan didn't let her. Michael abruptly came to his senses but hears nothing. No matter how loud he shouts, no sound reaches him. People in protective suits gave Michael a leaflet. It says he should stay at home, covered like a white sheet. They will deliver water and food to him. Michael tried to resist, but he was forcefully pushed back. The research center where Susan worked is empty. Only Stephen walks through the dark corridor alone. Michael got scared at home when they brought him food in a plastic form, but he still has no appetite. Later, he called Susan to apologize and justify himself, but she simply threw away the phone. This marked the beginning of her rage episode as she trashes the office, while Michael continues to apologize. After all, he hears nothing and has no idea what is happening on the other end of the line. All he wants is for Susan to come back. It's a pity she didn't hear the man confess his love to her. The television advises Michael to stay at home. After some time, Susan woke up, deafened, and was shouted at by the enraged Stephen, but she'll never know what he wanted from her. Michael still went out onto the empty street, surrounded by broken cars and piles of garbage. He decided to visit a restaurant and found his boss lying on the floor with a baseball bat in hand. By the way, in the movie, the sound also completely disappeared. Susan went to her sister's place. She wrote that she was right about Michael being a jerk. Even in such a difficult time, there were people who continued to do their work. Perhaps they think that life will go on anyway. Susan found a photo of her and Michael, crumpled it, and threw it away. The chef started cooking. With a new order, a light bulb lights up. People have learned the language of gestures. Surprisingly, musicians are playing in the club. Visitors simply lean against the speakers to feel their vibrations. The investigation of the terrible virus continues. Some are already starting to prepare for the loss of vision. Others try to focus on the most important thing in their lives. Michael often comes to Susan's window, hoping that she will notice him someday. Just as the Ice Age suddenly caught mammoths, darkness descended on the earth for people. But first, there was an incredible joy and bliss, deep gratitude for being alive. Most importantly, a strong desire to be with each other, approval, forgiveness, and love. Susan rushed to work at Michael's, and he flew to her apartment. They almost missed each other, but they still saw each other for the last time in their lives. And blind but in love, they managed to find each other.